my client and now friend here that's going to talk about body language. Dominique has served our country. We thank her for her military service. She is also retired law enforcement, and she is very good. You can go into your military background, but very good at all the aspects of body language of which we use in everyday life. And this is not just for our businesses. I am so excited to hear her presentation and to see what she can teach us. Gary's going to tape it. We're going to give Dominique the floor and let her go, and then hopefully have some time afterwards for some Q&A. And I know this is something that we can revisit many times again if we want to continue to expand. So without further ado, I introduce Dominique Corbett.
It is a distinct honor to have been invited to talk to you. That's one thing I wanted to say. Thank you very much for including me. I've been here since August, and I bought the house a year ago, but there was a delay in getting here that was an agreed delay. So as Debbie said, my name's Dominique Corbett. I retired in August after 28 and a half years as a police lieutenant. Well, I was an officer, a detective, a sergeant, a training sergeant, then a lieutenant, in patrol and detective bureau. And I also did 7.5 years in the Army Reserves as an interrogator, and then 16.5 years as an intelligence analyst with the Air Force. My unit went too far away. I couldn't commute as a reservist all the way to Maryland from Connecticut. That's where I'm originally from. So that's where I grew up, pretty much. So that's my main background. I have a couple different degrees, and I'm actually returning as a student here at University of South Carolina, Aiken, for just head candy, creative writing English. So I wanted to do something to engage my right brain again, because as a police officer, you're always left-brained, facts, you know, on the above data, I respond to the above address, spoke to the complainant, blah, 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 and it's very formulaic, very templated. So in order to write again, maybe once in my life, I'm gonna have to try to pursue this degree and open that part of my brain up again. So the goal with body language, I'm not just going to talk about body language, but I expand a little more to that, to nonverbal communication. Body language is the integral part of that, but there's a lot of other aspects to it. And if there's any of this, feel free to take any notes or whatever you want, but I'm more than happy to get the resources and stuff. I use a bunch of different resources, including some UK ones, because the UK does a lot of kinesthetic studies, studies about body motion, range, and how it does express and reveal where your brain's at, how you're feeling in that moment, and how to accurately interpret all the different signs, because it's not just one thing, not how a person sits or how they stand or the eye contact they make or don't make. It's not just one of those things. It's a combination of a lot of different things. And the goal that we want, and you as professionals want, is to basically detect and avoid deception, right? And for you it's relevant, I think, more than anything, because body language is the integral part of communication, and for your business to succeed, if you're recruiting people and retaining people in your businesses as professionals, you need to be able to try to understand where that person really is and how they're expressing themselves, because they might actually be giving you a clue. An employee you've had, a very faithful employee for 8 or 9 years, they might be giving you a clue that you otherwise wouldn't recognize, saying something's going really bad at home. Some people can cover it up pretty well. Some people know this, that their workload all of a sudden is just failing. They're not communicating, they're kind of shut themselves in the office, they're not doing their walk around with the coffee in the morning, that kind of thing. Those are the type of things you need to be able to detect early. Because after a while, the person figures, I'm sometimes giving off all these obvious signals and nobody seems to care. And that is absolutely the most tragic thing, because bad things can happen as a result of that. So we'll talk with motive. We want to understand people's motives and intents. And it's not just the obvious, I want to close a deal. It's not just the, I want to open a business, I want to make more money. Those are the obvious financial transactional things. What I'm speaking about is, what is their personal motivation? It may be religion, giving back to something, taking care of animals, whatever their internal motivation is. That's what you want to key on, and how to detect when it's present, because that's how you influence people, and that is how you understand them, and they can influence you in a good way. There's 4 types of basic body movements, and I tried to give like athletic comparisons. One is like light and bouncy, think cheerleader. And there you see these people around the office, okay? And this is one real big gym. There's like 4 big body motions that you'll see. Soft and fluid, more like a ballet. Controlled, soft and fluid, but very at ease. So it's usually a very open, confident person. Hopefully, usually in good health too, because in order to be fluid, you have to have all your joints work. Mine don't all work, but I try to be that way. Dynamic and determined. Think of a gymnast doing a floor exercise. You see those people walking through the hallways, and they're going somewhere. They've got a mission, and get out of their way, they'll knock you over. And they don't even mean it that way. But maybe they were raised that way. Maybe their parents were military. Maybe they grew up on military bases, and they're told to hold themselves a certain way and march to a destination with a purpose. So understanding how these people reflect how they move is important, because that's the first time you might encounter them is in walking in your office for an interview. And then the last would be precise and bold. That person is usually probably the easiest read because they're not subtle. Think of ice skaters when they're doing their jumps. They line up, they go into the corner, they get themselves going in, they jump. So you see it coming for a mile. You will find this more prevalently in men, but not only in men, but more, they've got a job to do. And much more frequently in people focused in left brain, engineers, scientists, people work with their hands because they're focused. They have to be, because that's what they do. So gestures. Most of facial expression and gestures, only about 7% of what we communicate to each other is verbal. About 38 or so, people argue 36, 38, whatever, is tonality, inflection, raising your voice. Do you talk loud? Do you talk quietly? Do you talk slowly? Do you talk fast? That's important. But body language and facial expressions is where we get our reads. And the one thing that all of us, especially here as civilized, educated people, don't like to admit is that we are animals. We are animals. Human animals, very complex animals, but we are still animals. That's why we still have instincts. That's why we still grab onto things, fight or flight, because we are animals. And that is not a bad thing. People think, oh, you can't say that, Even our dogs and cats give us signals as to what they're thinking about all the time. They're a lot simpler to read. Wild animals are harder only because we don't have a lot of encounters with them. If we knew wild animals or worked in a park, we'd be able to read them like that. But we don't. But our domestic pets give us all kinds of signals. My cat will walk right up to me and go, ow. Oh, you want a treat? Okay. She's got me well trained. But humans, we do all the same things, but we combine all kinds of other stuff with it. All kinds of other stuff. And you can make analogies to how animals present themselves in certain circumstances. You go, yeah, it's kind of like I've seen, and you will do that. So one thing that bad habits in the workplace that you want to be aware of, and these are all. This is actually the source of this is the FBI, the folks who do studies of human nature, interrogations and stuff like that. But they're saying in general, as an employee, as an employer, things to avoid. These are going to be pretty obvious, but you will, in your mind, think, oh my God, I've seen this all the time. Bad posture and slouching, guilty. Because I had to wear a uniform for so long, so it was always like, this way. So now when I don't have to wear one, I kind of go, oh, that seems better. Fidgeting. That is oftentimes, might be an indicator of ADHD. It might be that the person is agitated about something at home, especially if they don't normally fidget, or they could be intensely bored. So if people have a short attention span or they're not interested in the subject, they're going to start doing the thumb turning, the kind of thing, the obvious signs like that. And they will, especially if they, one way to avoid that, if you find yourself doing that, and this is not the appropriate setting to do that, keep your hands open and visible. Just keep them on the table if you have to go like this, whatever works for you. But if you find yourself kind of fidgeting because you're like, oh, damn, come on, get on with it, prayer. It works. Holding a really tense facial expression. Some people do that really intent person. It's not really conducive to good communication, unless that's what you're trying to give them, like, okay, get out of the office kind of thing. But generally speaking, it usually is an indicator of frustration, anger. You may be angry at the person. So you want to watch those things, and you're going to learn about yourself, how you do them. Sometimes it's worth it to maybe even tape yourself doing the transaction. Watch your own posture, because we all have different combinations. Some of them have to do with our physical health. Some of them have to do with the way we were brought up. You just don't know. There's a lot of different things there, but the biggest thing you want to avoid too is holding a tense facial expression and ignoring a person if they come up to you. And a lot of people are all torn to this thing. This stupid thing goes off and everybody stops. Mine's muted and it's going to sit there. If you're obviously waiting for you have a relative in the hospital or something important, just make sure to preempt, kind of give that warning to the person who might be coming up so that they know, hey, excuse me, I'm so sorry, but I have this situation that I actually have to kind of watch my phone a little bit, so I'm not trying to ignore you kind of thing. It's very important to consider that, because the person is always more important than this stupid thing, okay? I don't care how important the message is unless it's somebody dying. it can wait. And people will see you looking down at this thing, especially this generation, under 30, and they don't mean it rudely. It's what they've grown up with, and we're gonna have to actually kind of pull them out of there and teach them to watch people, watch their hands, to express, emote. Once in a rare while, when you go through a store now and you get a cashier who actually is an extrovert and actually talks to you and says hello, how many times recently have you gone through a line buying something and they just go, like they don't say hello, how are you, how's your day, thank you very much, thank you for coming to our store. No. Take the item, ring, ring, take the thing, hand it to you. You're like, wow, I could hire a chimpanzee to do that. It's like, you're not gonna get people coming back like that. So, and the obvious crossing your arms and all that kind of thing. Haptics. Haptics is touch. So it's like shaking someone's hand, holding their arm when you're talking to them, when you're showing emotions, showing caring. Haptics. Very important to understand that there are different cultural things. We'll get into spacing and stuff too, but haptics is extremely important in being able to express genuine caring. But again, you have to understand the cultural barriers that might prohibit certain touches, certain, in parts of the world, men can't really directly look at women without insulting them. There's certain gestures and touching rules that are different, say in Europe. The physical distancing, which is considered everyday comfort zone, is different. If we were in a pub in England, I'd be sitting right here. I'd be right on top of you, and it would be normal, And if I were in Asia, I'd probably be like right on top of you. Because that's their social distancing. They will, if they don't know you and you're a Westerner as an Asianer, they will probably go up and be extremely polite, and then they'll back off because they've learned that we don't do this communication. But I know when I was in the former Soviet Union and then in Russia, I had friends that would come up to me and be talking to me like right here, and you're just like, wow, I really wasn't trying to give you a dental exam, and I'm not qualified to do so anyway. But the personal spacing is very different, and you'll notice that when you're trying to get through the metro. And then there's something called artifacts and avatars, which is, we're going to get more into this, but it's basically the impression that you create of yourself. And you will find it in strong professions, especially ones involving uniforms. Those avatars and artifacts are very, very strongly pronounced. I mean, when I put on my police uniform, I was saying something. If I were a doctor and I put on my lab coat, that gives me prestige. And I will wear it a certain way, because I feel that it puts me at a really strong position. It gives me that impression of strength. So even clothing and appearance, and of course we all know that because we dress a certain way, but that can be very important. Culturally, I have one example I can give you from my personal experience. I was on a military mission in Kazakhstan, Almaty, and I was assigned to the press corps. And I had to explain to them that they're going to invite you to drink tonight. That's just what they do. And if you refuse the invitation, nothing will occur here. So you have to go, but we can get you out of it soon. It's like but a minimal is an hour and a half to 2 hours. You have to physically be in their presence, because in most countries, they want to learn about you. How many kids you got? Where did you grow up? What did you study in school? How long have you been doing whatever you're doing? They want to have that information, not just nosiness or anything like that, but that's how you read a person. Because one of the things we'll get into later is, how do you tell when someone's telling the truth? Well, you got to get a baseline, right? So you got to tell them and ask them questions about which they have no reason to lie. Because then they will show you who they really are, even if only briefly. That's why you have to watch. Obviously, you shouldn't be having to assume deception from people, but you want to get a read as to what the truth looks like. It's very, very important to do that. Whether it's how they physically hold themselves, how they make eye contact or don't. And we'll get into eye features as well. Linguistics is another really important factor, and you will hear people actually tell you how they learn. They will say things like, I hear you, auditory learner, that's me. I see what you mean, visual learner. I feel you. Yeah, I feel what you're saying, I get you. Then they're probably more, they're more emotional, they're and they tend to learn physically. They like to do things with their hands more readily. Maybe they like to cook. Maybe they're skilled carpenters, but they like what they can touch. They want to feel it. But people actually express that when they talk, if you listen. They say, oh yeah, I hear what you're saying. So not just listening to what you're saying, but they might be people who learn auditorily very readily. So those are the type of things you want to listen to when you're speaking with someone. And you can elicit it just by asking certain questions. You can even just ask them, hey, how do you learn? If we have to train you, what's the best method? What will work best for you? And that's really important. And they might not know. You might have to actually learn. They might not even know. So mirroring, we use this in interrogation a lot. So like you, I'd be mirroring you like this if I were questioning you, because I would, at a very subtle level, make you feel like I was relating to you in a physical way, because I'm doing what you're doing. So it's kind of like, hey, we're in the same thing here, you know? It's kind of like when we all stand up and do the Pledge of Allegiance, we all feel that bond together. It's the same type of thing, they call that mirroring. So when you do that physically, if you're interviewing somebody, you can see they're kind of uptight, it's okay to lean forward and just kind of calm them down a little bit, and then maybe even lean back, because that's the opposite. And maybe that'll draw them into going, okay, relax. Especially if you get a real young person and they're nervous as hell, you can just do the opposite of mirroring them first so that they feel a connection, and then pull them back and let them relax. So you can help them succeed. It's very, very important, mirroring. We use it a lot in interrogation. So one thing that worked really well in police work, went to a lot of domestics, as you can possibly imagine. And men and women think differently. They react to emotion differently. If you show up on a very active domestic where people have been hurt or screaming and yelling, kids are not, I've found very frequently in domestics where if guys were still all charged up, I couldn't get anything from them because they're all right-brained. And women, we can kind of pseudo be in both places at once sometimes, but guys, it's usually one or the other. And the only way to get the facts from the gentleman was to ask him factual things about which he had no reason to lie. So I could see what he looked like telling the truth. I'm sorry, sir, I have to ask you these questions, but can I just get my sergeant, I have to fill out a report no matter what happens here. So can I please get your date of birth? Can you tell me the exact address here? Did I miss an apartment number? Can you give me your phone number? And do you have a middle name? How many kids are here? All the factual things that they'll be like fighting themselves for about 10 seconds because they're having to go from here to here. But they have to give me objective answers because I'm asking them objective questions. So then all of a sudden they shift from all that anger. And then I usually ask them to sit down. It's like, just relax. I'm going to interview everybody, so there's no hurry. I want to get the facts, which they usually can relate to, especially if they've already transitioned to their left brain. Then I actually can get what happened. And they don't relive the emotional. They can actually tell me, well, okay, so I came home, I'd had a bad day, blah, blah, blah. And then I actually get what happened. And I've already watched them tell me things that they had no reason to lie about. And so now when they're telling me things, I can see an inconsistency. I can see, okay, yep, track and show, oh, you just lied to me, okay. So you want to get a good picture of what they look like physically, in their eyes, in their gestures, what is truthful. And it's those inconsistencies that are the tells of deception. And so, continuing here, I was going to show you a little video. I don't know if you'll be able to see it, it's too small, but you can hear it. And it's 34 seconds. It's from a movie called Feds, which is hysterical. It's about these two women who get selected back in the today to attend the FBI Academy. And you probably recognize the actor who plays one of the instructors. He was a very famous actor. And, let's see if I can do it with sound. Okay, hold on. Sound. For what it's worth.
Sir.
Yeah, that's probably better.
Have a seat right here, Mr. Brown. Thank you, sir. Mr. Brown, have you ever used illegal drugs for recreational purposes? Eyes tilted up. He's thinking about it. But if the answer is no, it's too late to be convincing. Thank you, Mr. Brown. You go back to your
See, so if the answer was yes and truthful, it's too late to be convincing now. Because he had already given all the indicators of looking to the wrong direction, visually trying to invent, trying to recall. If you never did it, you just say no. So if you ask somebody a yes/no question, there's hesitation, and it should be something pretty obvious, there's deception going on. Because a yes/no question is a yes/no question for a reason. So if you say, have you ever smoked marijuana? Yes or no? It's pretty straightforward. Also keep in mind, two audiences that you may have to deal with are highly functional people on the autism spectrum. Not only do they not emote and physically show their gestures consistently with how they're thinking, because they read or don't read certain human social signals, emotional intelligence differently. They have superior intellectual areas sometimes in other areas, but the social signaling that we take for granted or have learned over many years is much harder for them because they, the way their brain processes information is just a little different. And also keep in mind, even more commonly, because you would probably know a person who's on the autism spectrum after meeting them after a few times, and maybe right away. But introverts and extroverts. Remember, introverts will tend to be a little more conservative in their gestures, more conservative in their facial expressions. It's not they don't have them, but they internalize them, and they prefer to internalize them. It's not that they can't express them or don't want to, but they choose when they want to, and they otherwise internalize things. So sometimes you might get someone who you know closely, and they're just kind of looking at you, and they're listening, and you're like, okay, can I get a reaction, please? And it may just be that they're internalizing it, they're processing it, and so they may not give you the obvious signal that someone like an extrovert like myself would, like blares it out like on a horn or something. So I'm real easy, but not everyone is, and you might have some of those people in your businesses or in an interview, or a client who will just kind of more sit, and you're like, okay, are they not hearing what I'm saying? Could they care less? But that's not really the case. It's just maybe they're internalizing it, processing it, and say, let me get back to you. So you might have those clients too. And they're more frequent than you would imagine. And some introverts, actually a lot of introverts, have learned to put on a facade. They've had their alternate character, which they use in public forums. Pamela, my friend, she had her police facade, where she'd do what she had to do at work and stuff like that, and she'd be exhausted at the end of the day, because she's playing a role. She's being honest, she's doing a job, she's doing it very, very well. She's exceptionally good at it. But it was exhausting for her to have to engage with people on a regular basis, call them all the time, interview them for warrants she was doing. It was exhausting to have that much interface with a human being for her. So sometimes if you see some of your employees who might be introverts and they look exhausted, it might just be lay off them for a while. Let them do some other paperwork, back off, give them some time, some space, and that might work for them. Keep them healthy in the office, keep them on the job. Body language is a combination of facial expressions, postures. People staying like this could be very aggressive. People when their hands in their pockets, maybe they're quietly confident. People standing like this might just be thinking. They're sitting like this, they're probably not just thinking. They might be angry, they might be frustrating, they might be just elsewhere and don't want to be there, voluntold to be at a meeting, one of those things. One of the key facial things that you will often see is if you have a person who's going like this, they might be listening intently, especially if they're leaning forward. If people are engaging leaning forward, especially in an interview, that means they want to hear what you have to say. Their eyes will tend to dilate. That means they're interested. They will lean forward, and they will tend to focus on what you're saying. And they might even maintain some pretty intense eye contact because they're really listening to you. I do because I read lips when people talk to me. And that's just because I'm auditory. So sometimes people, I'll have to look away, just not, you have to be aware when somebody's kind of like, why is she staring at me? So, oh, sorry. That's not what I meant to do, I was listening. So one of the things with eyes, we're going to get into eyes in a second. If you have people who blink a lot and they don't have an eye issue and they don't have contacts in, two things. It could be a sign of affection. It could be that they're attracted to you or something. But a lot of times it's agitation nerves, or they won't blink at all. And that means they're trying desperately to control their agitation and anxiety. So if you see someone in an interview and they're blink, 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 and then stop, you're like, well, what's going on? They realized that they were going out of their minds with their blinking, and now they're going to try to control it. Now their eyes are going to probably start watering because they're not blinking enough. But again, mirror them, blink a little bit more maybe than you would, and then rein them back in and let them calm down. Because then you're going to get more truthful reads on what they're doing, because they're not all focused on what presentation they're trying to give to you. They're trying to over-impress you or something. So you can avoid that. Don't worry, I'm not reading all of these. These are just little things, so don't forget. Also, yes, remember that nonverbal cues, because there's more than just what we've talked about. We're going to talk about more. Nonverbal cues can't be interpreted in a vacuum. So whether it's haptics, just because a person has the greatest handshake in the world doesn't mean they're honest. Just because a person has a very relaxed posture when they sit and they listen and everything looks wonderful, don't take these things individually too importantly. Look at the whole picture. Follow your gut on these things. Your intuition as an animal, excuse me again, but as an animal will probably be more accurate, because you'd be like, everything looked right, but something just wasn't right. Just something in my gut made me really uncomfortable. Follow up with that, because if you think about it, you'll probably be able to go back and say, you know what it was? he was talking about this, and all of a sudden it changed to that, or she, whatever. Something was inconsistent, and that's what you're looking for if you're looking for deception. In most cases, that's not what you're looking for. You're looking to establish bond communication and rapport. But it's hard to have rapport if the basis of the relationship is going to be based on deception. So that's why you want to pick that up right away. If the person's already trying to snow you, you probably don't want to deal with them. Or at least you want to know what's going on. Emotional body language, yes, and blinking, eye gazing. Some people have been taught, I know my father used to tell me, make sure you have, look someone in the eye, be square, be honest, and stuff like that. And there was a lot to that. But with that posture also has to come open chest, open hands, visible hands, tonality and inflection in the voice that's consistent. It's the whole picture. That's what you have to be aware of. It's the whole picture. It's not just eyes, posture, standing, not sitting. Gaze direction. We're going to go into eyes in just a moment. Right and left positions of your brain. Okay, we already spoke about this. Right brain is usually your more intuitive, creative, inventive imagination side of your brain, as a general rule. The left side is more your cognitive, scientific, factual, memory side. So, in consistency with that, people will tend to, there's always the exception biologically, but 98% of the people will tend to look up into the left, which if you're facing them is your right. Keep that in mind, it's the opposite. So if you ask me a question, I have a bunch of questions we could do this with, but if I look up, you ask me a question, I'm looking up and left, you're right. That means I'm trying to remember something from memory. I'm imagining it in my brain like, oh, I know I saw that before. If you ask me like, do you know where Flanagan's ice cream is? Yeah, it's not Richland Avenue. What's the next one? Barnwell, that's it. So I'm thinking up here because I'm remembering. I've seen it. I've seen the ice cream cone. I know what it looks like. I know it's over this way from church. So I'm imagining it up here. As an auditory person, if you're asking something, hey, so you got a phone call. Did the guy have an accent? Person's going to be like, to the left. Trying to recall because they heard it. They'll be like, oh gosh, I think he did. But they're going to look auditory. So this is memory auditory. Okay, something that you know and have heard. Something you remember and have seen. And then down and left is a genuine emotion. So if you ask something and it's like, oh, I don't know. Yeah, my dog's sick, and they kind of go like, oh, damn. They're either remembering something that you told them about that, or maybe their dog just died or something. And they're going to go down and left. And that's emotion, genuine feeling. So if you ask them a question about something that they felt, and they're being honest, they're going to look down and left, you're right. If they're remembering something auditorily, they're going to look left and about ear level. And if they're remembering something memory, they're going to look left and slight angle. They won't look straight up. That's the praying position. Praying position means they're probably about ready to lie to you, unless they're praying. So if they look straight up, so if they look to the left and then kind of move over, that means they're searching the brain a little bit. That's normal. But if you ask them a memory question, they kind of go, they're coming up with something, and they're probably going to end up over here. So now, because this is the creative side, and this is not steadfast, this is going to be, you're going to look at this with their physical posture, with their tonality, did their eyes shift? But top right, your left, is usually inventative. So if you ask them a question and they don't know, they're either trying to think of something that vaguely resembles it and they might have some knowledge of, so they might go back and forth, kind of like trying to think about it. Or they're inventing something and gonna lie. Same thing looking this way. If you ask them a question that would be a hearing type of thing, but they look this way, they're trying to either invent something or they're trying to relate to something they have no idea about, and they'd probably just be shorter if they say, I don't know. And down into the right, your left, is usually emotional deception. So if they're going to try to act interrogation, you see this all the time with criminals. They feel so bad that they got caught. And they think they're trying to be emotional, but they're trying so hard to commit you that they're genuinely emotional, they look to the wrong side. So it's great. Because they're lying. They're angry and terribly upset about being caught, but not about what they did. Because they always think that, well, I expected to get away with it or I wouldn't have done it, right? That's why they do it. That's why cons do what they do. That's why criminals do what they do, because they're smarter than all of us, and they'll get away with it. It's only those dumb people that get caught. Okay. Keep thinking that way. A lot of mouth expressions. People chewing on their lip, going like this. If you're having an interview with somebody and they're sitting and they're covering their mouth while they're talking to you, they're lying to you. They're deceiving you about something. They're either withholding information or they're actively lying to you. If they rub their nose a lot. They're going like, yeah, because they're usually covering their mouth as well. Yeah, I worked there for like 3 years. It was pretty good, but yeah, my boss and I didn't see eye to eye. They're lying. They're lying. To what extent, I don't know, but you're gonna have to read that with other things. But people are constantly like covering their nose, covering their mouth when they're talking to you, especially in an interview. There's other stuff going on, and they will usually tend to lean back because you're creating distance, so you can't see they're lying to you. So they think, but they'll sit back and go, yeah, that was a pretty good job, but really, do you really talk in an interview like that? But they don't realize they're doing it because they don't want to necessarily make it obvious they're deceiving, so they're trying to act like they're comfortable. They figure, if I sit back, I look comfortable. No, you're creating distance. That's what you're doing. So if you mirror them and go, oh, really? Yeah, so you didn't like that job, huh? And then they'll kind of be like, oh, what are they doing? They're even creating more distance. They're like, oh, I'm not faking this one out, kind of thing. So that's a good way to pull them out of that too. Language of the mouth, gestures. All right, so we have gestures. A lot of people won't realize they're doing it in an interview. They'll clench a fist. Sometimes it's to relieve stress. They'll be, the white knuckle kind of thing, and they'll be doing that because they're really nervous. And it might just be they haven't been in an interview for a long time. They did the same job for 20 years. This is the first time the person they're interviewing with is 30 years younger than them. They really want the job. So, but again, what are the other body motions? So just because they're going like this, if their chest is open and wide to you, they're maintaining good eye contact, their tonality and their voice inflection is consistent, they look the same as when they're answering factual questions, they could just be, and you could always just tell them, relax. Interview's going good, relax. And then they're like, oh, geez, wow, was that obvious? Clenched fist, you'll see that. Cultural differences, like I said, not just physical space, because you have the intimate distances up to like 1.5 feet, 18 inches. Then you have, say, 18 inches to 4 feet is that kind of working normal space, like our space right here, like 4.5 feet. You're comfortable there, you're comfortable there. The 15-foot rule is generally for people you don't know that well, acquaintances, people you pass in the hallway, unless you have a talking and otherwise relationship with them. And then the 15 to 25 foot is basically as far as you go, and that's usually presentation. So if I wanted to stand in the corner to present to you, it would be the 15 to 25% rule. But like I said, other parts of the world, that distance is different, and you have to learn what that distance is. And if you're going to travel somewhere, learn it ahead of time. Also, gestures. I remember before we deployed to the Middle East, you don't put your foot up on your knee and show the bottom of your shoe. It's just not done. It's very, very rude. Now, we do the peace symbol like this a lot of times, right? Well, if you do this to an English person or an Australian, you just told them a very, very bad thing. You use the middle finger with them. So that's about as crude as you can possibly get. Now, if they hear this accent, they'll probably be like, right, mate, we don't do that here. They'll just kind of put it off like, okay, we're not going to take insult because we don't think you just know what you just did. So learn those indicators. Hand postures can be very important because they might be different. A lot of Asians sit like this, and that's to show open hands, and they will sit like with them way in front of you. That's how they sit. Okay, so they're not trying to act like they're in control, superior, and I'm the boss here. They're being polite. So do the cultural studies, extremely important. Can literally make or break a deal, and friendship potentially if you go somewhere else. We already talked about crossed arms, crossed legs, need for privacy sometimes. So if the person's in an interview and they're kind of like this, with the legs crossed over at the ankles, or really crossing legs over and kind of like that, something isn't right. Whether they're really, really uncomfortable, they realize, oh my God, there's no way I'm going to get this job, something like that. But normal crossed legs is perfectly comfortable. But again, if their back is all hunched, they're aggressive, they're frustrated, they're scared, or they're intensely bored. Now, obviously, if they're interviewed, they're not going to be intensely bored. But again, watching, that's why you ask, one of the first questions I think everybody knows to ask, tell me a little bit about yourself. Because that, how old are you? How long have you lived here? Whatever it is, this much education, your hobbies are, because there's no reason to lie about those. So you can kind of get a read as to how they generally sit when they're talking about something they're comfortable with and have no reason to lie about. Let's see here. So, trunk of the body open, exposed again is honesty. So usually when you meet with somebody and they shake your hand and they're right to you at the right distance with good eye contact, you feel pretty confident that they're pretty much being honest with you. So you know what that looks like. And it's usually willingness, openness, and that it tends to be a more reflective personality that will be consistent throughout their dialogue with you. If it changes, that inconsistency is very significant. So if they do all that stuff, but then when they're answering questions, things are not consistent with that, either they snowed you and conned you real good with the handshake, or something, the subject matter is something they're very uncomfortable with. For it could be a lot of different reasons. Why didn't you get into the FBI? Well, and they got caught with cocaine or something. That's not a question they're going to be comfortable answering. So when after they've been open with you about everything else, hey, I heard you applied to the FBI. Yeah. And all of a sudden their posture is going to get defensive and stuff like that. So, and people don't know they're doing it. The ones who control it are manipulators, and they are deceivers, and they're probably professional criminals because they're very aware of. They practice in the mirror, having people ask them, or in their minds asking them questions that are not comfortable to answer, and they watch if they're giving all the signals away because they know how to read people. They're like car dealership guys. They know how to read people. They can read you in a heartbeat. They know your postures you're walking up to, and this person's going to buy or not going to buy. They are really giving a defensive about the price or not. They know that when by the time you get within 10 feet of them, they've already read you. It's like flight attendants. That's why they greet you when you get on the plane. They're looking for certain signs. They're looking for eye contact. They're looking for looking down. They're looking for your hand posture. Are your hands, are you tense? Are you holding onto that bag a little too tight? They're looking for all those things, and they'll read you in about 4 seconds. From the second you get off that jetway and you're starting to enter the plane, that's why they will make a point of making eye contact with you. If the flight attendant isn't, it's because they're busy putting something away, and then they're going to flip right around, they're going to continue that. Or there's another flight attendant 5 feet away, and they're going to do the same thing. And they're trained to do that. And they're smart about it. They're very good at it. And you can tell right away when they've read you and they've read you right, because they'll smile right away. Like you said, hey, how you doing? Especially if you're not having a good day, fake it. Because then they're going to be watching you if you're like, oh, you know. Because I know people are tired when they're traveling, right? And it's hard to fake that. But at least be nice. Say, I'm exhausted, I'm sorry. I'd try to smile, but I'm too damn tired. Just be honest. But then they see you're honest. And they read you're honest. They know what your honest looks like. That's all they want. That's all. They got 5 seconds. 5 seconds. Because the people, you know how it is once the cattle call goes on. You got about 1.5 to 2 foot between you and that next carry-on that keeps bumping into your heel. And that's all the time they got to read that person. And they got 263 people to do that with. Even if there's 5 flight attendants, that's a lot of people. And then you got to remember where they're sitting too. Where does that person have to watch? Oh yeah, they're 24B. But they do that, no kidding. I have friends who are flight attendants. So that's for real. Personal space, we did already discuss that. Public distance, we talked about introverts. We did the eye clues, and the visual construction. So let me just get to modalities we talked about as far as inventing. Remember, your left brain, if they're looking on your left, it's creativity, possible deception. But don't take it only as itself, because you have to look at the whole picture. Humans are very complicated animals. So you can be pretty convincing with 3/4 of the thing, but that one inconsistency is going to jump out and slap you across the face. And that's the thing you want to look into deeper. Try to get that little anchor in there and spread it apart and figure out what the heck it is. Why are they potentially being deceptive to you? How can that help them or not help them? Because maybe they are doing things that aren't going to help them, and they don't even know it. 9 types of nonverbal communication. This includes body language, of which body language is the most important. Because that's the part that people watch. And part of that is fight or flight. Does this person look like they're gonna hurt me? You know, especially if they're encountering you after dark and you're a woman who's over 40, you're probably gonna look at that guy walking up to you going, you know, or you hear those footsteps behind you, you're gonna be a little bit more attentive to where their hands are and stuff like that. And that's one of the first things you learn as a cop, you watch a person's hands. So, facial expressions, we know that smile versus a frown versus anger. The eyes tell you so much, but it's the mouth position. Are they, you know, you can just like go from happy to really angry really fast, and you can tell the change. And especially in an interview, if the person there answering nice questions is like, so tell me why you lost your last job, and they kind of frown and grimace and stuff like that. Ooh, that's not a good experience. Okay, well, let's see what they're going to say and see if they can be honest about it, because that's what you want. You want their honesty. You don't want made up crap. It's just a waste of everybody's time. Gestures, waving. I do a lot of waving. I don't know why. I think it's probably a childish thing, but I like to wave to people. It's like when I go to university, they probably think I'm an idiot. But I'll go by the military guys and I go, hey. I do it all the time. And I used to teach people on my street in Connecticut to wave. I had everybody trained, everybody. There's only about 12 houses on the street, But you saw my car coming, you better be ready to wave, because I'm waving. That's just going to happen. Pointing in a good way. In military, we learn point this way, don't point, because that's rude. So you always do this, and as a military person too, and in the police, you do this, like, come this way, sir. You don't go that way, because that's rude. Unless you have to be rude, and then you do. The person that you're dealing with determines how they will be treated. I don't. The thumbs up, we all know that one, right? Especially Americans, we do that a lot. Europeans have learned this one. They don't really understand it, but they use it. Because they're like, okay, the Americans, yeah, okay. Because they'd rather do this or do that. You know, have you ever seen a European football player who just scored a goal go like this? No. They're gonna go. So that's what they do. Yeah, paralinguistics. Very important. And this is one of the first tells that you will see of deception. Someone comes out speaking normally, good inflection, good tonality, good pronunciation, all of a sudden they get really quiet. And they're going to be a little introspective. And they break eye contact, their body becomes a little more defensive, and something's going wrong there. It could be emotional lapse. It could be some question you ask them, had a reaction, maybe they have something going on in their family. And that's where if you have an employee you know, and all of a sudden that breakdown occurs, especially when the voice gets really quiet. Really quiet usually means deception or fear. Quiet is not anger, because they'll raise their voice if they're angry. And they will tend to take a more aggressive posture. They'll put their hands on the table, go like this. They'll try to make themselves in a peacock, put those feathers up, make them look all big, like cats who raise their hackles and stuff. Same type of thing. So listen to inflection and pitch, and that's where, again, listen to how they describe things they're comfortable with. How loud do they talk? Do they kind of have a monotone like many Americans do and they don't really raise their voice? Or do they emote? Do they inflect? And if they have lots of inflection and then it stops, that's weird. Everybody has a musicality and inflections in certain subject matters. And some people will become very, like I've noticed with friends that I have are engineers, if they're talking about, I don't know, going to play golf, they got inflection because they love golf. And then if I ask them, so you used to work on lathes, so how hard would it be to make a fill in the thing? Their inflection will oftentimes change left brain, and it'll become a lot more square, a lot more factual. It'll be a lot less golfy, because they're thinking. So if it's consistent with the subject matter, then that's regular. But inflection and tonality and voice volume should generally maintain consistency throughout the description. Even if they started being deceptive and stuff like that, usually that tonality is not going to change. So that's a really good indicator. Listen to how long and how high and low their voice goes and stuff like that. Very, very important. Proxemics, we talked about that. Personal distancing. Do they try to encroach on your space, or do they just lean forward because they're interested in what you're saying? Our eyes will tend to dilate. That usually means they're interested. They'll sit forward because they're being pulled towards your conversation. Very consistent with listening, interested, and honesty. Haptics I told you about, that's the handshake, the touching of the arm. With somebody you care about, and you have the ability, where it would be consistently comfortable and appropriate to do that. Like there's a lady in church, she always does that. If she comes up and talks to me, she always puts her hand on my arm. And she's a sweetheart. That's what she does. And when she's comfortable with you, she's going to come up. You're going to know it's her without even, she sneaks up behind you. That's that arm. It's going to happen every time. But that is her genuine way of showing affection. That's showing I trust you and I feel comfortable with you. And we as women tend to do that more than guys do, because guys could feel people are going to read it the wrong way, and probably true, depending, unless they know you, your relatives, or somebody they care about, and they can get in that distance with you, that's fine. But women will tend to do that, especially an older woman to a younger woman will tend to do that to show confidence and support and stuff. That's very common. Appearance, hairstyle, colors that we wear. We all know, I decided to wear blue because I hadn't worn it yet. I got this in Ireland. I'm like, you spend a bunch of money for it, wear. And then I realized that the green and the blue doesn't match my pants. I'm like, well, that's all right. My pants are underneath the table. It doesn't. So it's like, okay, I'm colorblind, and no more fluorescent lighting for this one. But or pull it out into natural light. But colors we wear. This should obviously be comfortable to you. Some people wear power colors. They're going to wear the red blouse, and that's okay. They just hopefully are aware of what they are presenting, how they're presenting it, and hopefully it's a color that works for them. But that's a real important indicator of how people are feeling, not just what they wear, but how they wear it. Their hair. It seems to be the thing of people, at least my age and older now, that all of a sudden we want to color our hair. I don't. But I see a lot of people out there with the blue and the purple, and why and where? Okay. I mean, that's fine. I don't understand it at all. But that is making an indication about who they are and how they're expressing themselves. That's very important. And we all know that appearance and dressing down for work is not really appropriate, not successful. People say, oh, it encourages communication. Not really. No. What it does is it increases informality, which means discipline can then start to weigh. And people might stop following rules because they think, oh, well, they're laid back about that then. So make sure people are dressing in your business lives the way that is appropriate. Maintain those little subtle disciplines, because it really does matter, because they might try to get away with other stuff other than that. That is actually shown. Artifacts, the last thing that we'll talk about. Artifact is basically how you present yourself to the world in your profession. I already told you, like military uniforms and stuff like that. And very important, like soldiers in their uniforms and stuff like that. One of the funniest things is like an unofficial uniform as police is when you go to become a detective or you're in plain clothes or you're training at the range that day, it's almost obligatory that you have to wear canvas pants with side pockets, cargo pockets, 511s, and a polo shirt. It's like, you gotta do it. You gotta wear your badge right next to your gun, you gotta have your extra sources, you gotta have your phone out of the way, you gotta have your cuffs showing. You gotta have your cuffs showing. And very important. And of course, if you have your obligatory, I'm a cop, just in case you didn't know I'm a cop, you have to have that shown. So that was one of the funniest things when I became a detective forever ago, because it became that unofficial thing. And then as a woman, they don't make detective clothes for women. They didn't make for a long time, they didn't make body armor for women. You had to wear the men's, get crushed, it was really uncomfortable. And all of a sudden, in the mid to late 90s, it became the unofficial, because that was a big, big gang era, so there was a lot of extra detectives. Then 9/11 happened, so then all these people were going into anti-terrorism. So everybody was wearing 511s, cargo pants. It was like the unofficial uniform, and it still is. If you ever went to a range or you went to a police officer, a police station, you'll see the guys with the 511s and the polo shirts. And their cuffs will be showing, their badge will be showing, their gun will be showing. So that's kind of what we do, and we laugh, but everybody knows it's the unspoken rule, that's what you wear. So that is, in a kind of a nutshell, a lot of different combinations of things that you can be aware of, that you can be aware of in yourself too. One of the things, pay attention to your own behaviors. What do you do when you're angry? Do you sit there and go, or does the bird automatically come out of you when someone cuts you off? Maybe you want to watch that. Watch those, the body language and nonverbal indicators that you admire that somebody else has. If someone, as you do, very patiently, very quietly, very undisturbing, I'm not good at that, but I admire the way she's done that for 40 minutes. And so that'd be something I'd be like, if that is a behavior that I want to duplicate, then I have someone that I can say, I like the way that person does that. I'm going to try to mimic that. So it's a self-awareness. And be a student of others. Watch and learn about the people you work with and the people, so that you are looking for those things all the time, and you can start to pick up on them, even with strangers. Because people you can practice on family, and you're like, oh yeah, I know when my mom does that, she's really pissed. She said, I'm fine. Yeah, okay, yep. We all know that one. Think before you act. Don't have that middle finger already coming up before you even let go of the steering wheel. Just move on with it. Be in control, because those nonverbal indicators that you give are very important about how people read you too. So you can help yourself by watching others. And also ask before you assume, because of different cultural indicators. You might say, I notice that you won't look me in the eye when we speak. Are you angry with me? It's okay to say it out loud. Because sometimes you're like, everything else is consistent, but why can't they watch me? Why are they doing this all the time? And you'll be like, hey, is there something down there? Did you drop your pen or something? And then I'll make, oh, geez, So, encourage people to demonstrate their honesty to you, and learn what your tells are, so that you can make sure that people can read you honestly too. So without that, that's kind of everything I had for you. I hope it was interesting.
Amazing.
So
I'm just sitting here thinking, all right, I know you said that you like to get a feel for who you work with, so like that whole evaluation was done on me.
Yep.
Whoa!
Yeah, we have to, as cops, we had to learn to read people right away. You had like the distance between this lady right here coming up to me to determine whether that person was a threat. Because you can close that distance with a knife probably faster than I can draw my gun. So I have to do my little L and then draw my gun. So as you're walking up to me, I'm watching your hands, I'm watching your posture, I'm watching your eyes. I'm watching, is your nose flaring? That's another one. People do that right before they attack you. And another one, the sucker punch. Wow, this is probably not something you're going to encounter, but God forbid you ever did. One of the best indicators is they will look away. Their shoulders will come up, then their shoulders will go down, they'll look away, and then they're going to swing for you. So this is one of the most obvious sucker punch things that you can avoid. So what they will do, literally, right before they hit you, if they're a good fighter, they will relax right before they hit you. So they'll get all aggressive, they'll posture up, like they're gonna go for you. Then they'll go, and then that's when they're gonna hit you. That's when, if you're ever playing with your dog, you can learn the same thing. If you're playing ball with your dog, you know how they puncture the volleyball, so now you can grab onto it back and forth. You notice that whenever they have it in their mouth and you're like this far away, you know you can grab it, they can pull their head away. Right, you're just like, how the hell did I not get that? Because you tensed up as you were going for it. They read that, child's play for them. So what my dog taught me was, if you get into them kind of close and you get your hands in a good position where it would have been before, go completely relaxed. Because then you're giving no signal, and you just go, and you got it. And they'll look at you like, how did you do that? But that's what you do. But if you ever need to sucker punch somebody or grab a ball from your dog or anything from your dog, relax. So if you feel yourself getting tense, just do it. But you have to pre-target what you're going to do. Your brain has to have already seen yourself do it so that you relax and your hand will just go right to that spot. It's unbelievable, but it works. Trust me, play with your dog. You'll laugh, you'll go, damn, it works. So questions.
Well, I just have a comment, when you said, it's important to learn yourself.
Yes.
Know about yourself. This was a number of years ago, and I was administrator at a hospital, and I had my group of units that I was responsible for, and I would always walk through the units to get to this one or that one. And one day, one of the nurses, the charge nurses, she stopped me, and she said, "Are you upset with us?" That's what I did.
Yeah.
I said, "No, I'm not upset with you at all. Why would you ask me that?" She said, "Because you've got a frown on your face."
Wow.
She said, almost always when you walk through our unit, you have a frown on your face. You look like you're upset. And I said, "Oh my gosh."
You had no idea.
"No, I'm not at all." And I said, "But I'll tell you what I'm thinking about when I'm walking through. I'm
Right.
almost always thinking about the issue that I'm walking towards
Left
and
brain.
trying to figure out how to solve it, how to approach it." And I said, "Apparently what you've discovered and I didn't know is that when I think, it hurts." And so,
Well, that's being left brain, and that's where you'll see
Yeah.
people are, like I'm saying, golf versus now I ask somebody an engineering question and that's their specialty. They're going to go into problem-solving mode.
Yeah.
And a lot of times it requires concentration, and you will kind of frown.
Yeah.
That's not uncommon.
Yeah.
So the person might just be deep in thought, trying to process.
Yeah.
So
Well,
It's
once
very
I told
smart.
her, and I said, "So you and all of the staff have my permission, and please, I invite you, stop me when I walk through, say hello." I said, "You'll see my expression will change."
yes,
So that was a huge learn.
because you
for
can't
me.
see yourself.
Right.
Sometimes you go, "Okay, is everything okay?" Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think we want to record ourselves. I don't.
Oh, God,
I
no.
don't want to see. I'll die.
So I didn't want to see myself in camera, so it's like, and my voice always sounds horrible. It doesn't
That's
sound
what
like
we
how we
think.
hear too, So, yeah.
But we've all got clients and customers that we interact with on a regular basis, so we could use this is fascinating information for the untrained layman of us. But we can all use this information very.
And as you see people walking in, you know the person walking in the office is going, bad day, huh? You instinctively know that, so you might want to inquire a little bit, because that also shows you care. I mean, that you actually noticed. Some people, they don't intuit very well, and they don't care enough to actually pay attention, so.
Michael?
You mentioned tonality as one of the methods of communicating.
Yes.
Is there anything that you've noticed or found that's linked between lots of ups and down tonalities or a very monotone tonality if someone's trying to put on a show, or if they're just kind of relaying information. Have you noticed a correlation at all between the two, or what?
Sometimes that's actually an excellent question, and it really, because it's so individual, a con artist type of person or criminal will use what has worked for them in the past. So if they've been a criminal their whole lives, they're going to be a lot more tonal because they're going to talk like a kid. And they're going to try to be very convincing, very influential. Their body movements will be very open and very fluid because they're trying to be convincing. A person who's only maybe being inconsistent about one thing, you're going to notice a change. If they were normal, up and down, all of a sudden they stop being up and down, their voice gets quieter. So you will tend to see it drag, like they throw out an anchor. It will tend to be quieter. And if they're really thinking about something and they recognize that they've become contemplative, they might explain that to you. They might say, yeah, you're making me think here, it's been a while. And they might honestly just be like, geez, where did that come from? And they might explain that to you, because you might be aware of it all of a sudden. It's like, oh yeah, sorry, you really made me think on that one. That had never crossed my mind, or I hadn't even thought about it for years, that kind of thing. But they should be able to articulate something like that so you understand what the change is about. But then it should resume to where they were before. So if they were like this, and then they go deadline, and then keep going. What happened to the deadline? That's an inconsistency. That should be an indicator. Then you have to think back, what were their posture? What was going on with their posture? Because all of a sudden you're going to get like, they go from whatever, open posture to, yeah, and they're going to back off. They're going to close up very frequently. They will lose eye contact. If they've been maintaining it well, and all of a sudden they go, what's going on? Okay, that question's a trigger. And I know when we do interviews for potential police recruit candidates, that's one thing we really look for. Because when we start asking the tough questions, and this is before the polygraph or before polygraphs, the polygraph comes later. When we're doing the basic background investigation, we ask them questions so that we give them the opportunity to tell us the stuff ahead of time, so when they go to the polygraph they're not going to fail it because they've already answered it honestly. So, and those are things we look for, is those changes. And usually it's younger people applying, so they don't have a real good ability to be deceptive. Like little kids, they suck at lying. It's great. That's why you always interview them first at a domestic. So, and you also ask them, do you know that it's wrong to lie? Because you want to know, they could have been taught since age 3 that it's okay to lie, especially to a person in uniform. So you never know that. So you have to ask them, you know that you can't tell me a lie, that it's wrong to do so, right? You know the difference between truth and false, right? You know, if I ask you a yes or no question and the answer is truly yes, that you have to say yes. And as long as they respond to that, then sometimes you won't get that answer though. Sometimes they've already been trained. By age 7, man, they're, wow. Yeah. But
what is looking straight down?
Usually contemplative, or trying to remember something that was a long time ago.
So it's not necessarily deception if they're thinking.
No, straight down. No, straight down is okay. It's only when they're usually over here and kind of going like this, and their eyes are kind of going. Okay. Sometimes they bounce between auditory, and they're coming up with something, or they're doing. They're winging it big time.
But straight up, they could be inventing.
Possibly, yeah. Sometimes I'll think straight up. Again, it has to do with like a long time ago. And if it's an emotional long time ago, I'll probably look down because that's emotional. If it was, gosh, what was the address when I lived in West Springfield? I might go to the prayer thing because it might be the only way I'll remember is if God sends it to me. But usually I'll be over here, and I might go in between here and here because I'm remembering, and I'm like trying to contemplate. But that's memory. That's emotional reaction. And it may be memory too, but it's emotionally related. So, but eyes are one indicator, a very good one. It's a good way to get your foot in the door, but watch their physical postures, because those are the things that are harder to control, unless you have trained yourself to sit like this. Then that's a little kind of like either you have a job where you have to do that because otherwise you're going to distract people, or you've worked on it for the interview, which is good on you, because that's a very good thing to be able to do. But yeah, the eyes are one indicator. The physical opening of the chest is a really good one. When someone greets you straight on, that's a very good thing. It shows their confidence, but it also shows openness. It shows willingness, and it generally shows honesty. So if they meet you and they kind of do one of these when you're shaking your hand, if they're not carrying a gun and just being safe, why are they turning their body away from you? That doesn't make sense. People don't do that normally, you know? So you'll pick up on that kind of, that's weird. Unless they have a back knee or something, okay, whatever. But yeah, watch for those consistencies along the whole dynamic of behavior, all the nonverbal cues, because they should be consistent. Good, bad, or indifferent, they should be consistent.
So when you're talking about haptics, what about hugging?
That's haptics, yes, touching. Haptics means touch. In most formal business situation, that will be a handshake or the, hey buddy, how you doing? You know, the pat on the back or whatever. But no, hugging, absolutely, yep. Yeah, haptics just means touch, physical communication with another individual as an indicator of where they're at. Yes, correct.
There's a lot of hugging in business in the South.
Yeah.
Well, the South in general are more huggy
Yeah.
and more friendly and more smiley, which I love. And I love the whole business preemptive conversation thing that you have to do that we don't do in the North. The North is
Small talk.
just get, excuse me, sorry to bother you, could you show me how to get to? Not the, hey, how you doing today? I'm so sorry to bother you. I'm like so incredibly lost. Do you happen to know where so-and-so? Oh, yeah, I can give you directions. Just go down that street. And they'll tell you all day long. All day long. But if you don't preempt it with that, they'll be like, damn, they're rude as hell. It's like, no, we just, we get to the point, and part of it is because we value your time, and we forget you probably do too, and you don't want to hear all kinds of just hello, how you doing? But I've noticed down here, hello, how you doing is usually a moderate hiding for an intelligence interrogation about your entire background. Southerners are not shy about asking you, so how long you lived here? Where you come from? What do you do? So you like it here? Do you have family around here? Did you have any pets? Do you like horses? I mean, you are going to get those 12 to 15 questions, and they're going to expect answers. So you better rehearse those answers. I already told my friend, when you come down here, already have a set answer to all those, because you're going to get all those questions.
Yeah, true.
So where are you living? How long you live there? Do you live with anyone else? You live by yourself? Are you married? Got any kids? They live around here? You're like, hi. But, yeah.
Nailed it.
It's like, wow, okay. I got family down here, so I should have remembered that. But like, you get the onslaught, and the worst part is when you go to a place where there's a bunch of new people at once, like Cedar Creek Golf Pub. You get 5 or 6 in a row. And you're like, can I just have my beer? Or can you all line up and I'll say it once? Please, just, I'm going to sit at the end of the table and just say it once. But yeah, it's funny. And then, of course, you leave there and you go on the golf course, the first person you golf with is questions. So you try to get them all in one place. But yeah.
Well, we are happy to have you here.
Yes, thank you very much. That was amazing.
Excellent. That was excellent. I want you back.
Okay.
That was very fascinating.